This is a talk that I put together very recently, and this is the second time I'm giving it. It's still a work in progress. And Robert keeps correcting me, and a whole bunch of folks keeps correcting me, and it's really been great because it's a series of maps that I put together on Seaside, off Seaside. It's the same frame, and it follows a 41-year trajectory, starting in 1980, going out to 2020 rather. And so let's start. So at the last time I gave a talk, Nathan asked me what the difference was between incremental and successional. And at that time, I kind of glibly said I thought they were the same thing. It doesn't matter. And I went back and started looking at some of my early drawings. And successional, I would kind of describe as this. You start off with a couple buildings on the corner, and you start to infill. And then finally, you get that over time. And that might actually take several hundred years in some cases. And then I found this Roger Lewis cartoon, which I think is really telling about Seaside, where these folks have bought a property at Seaside, and they've built their porch and they built their tower, and they're still waiting, and they built their picket fence, which is all required by the code, and then eventually they're going to build a house. And that's sort of kind of sums it up in terms of building incrementally. On the other hand, what we find today is that there's a lot of confusion between urban design and large architectural projects. Seaside is really a piece of urban design where it's a framework. Andres and Liz, Robert and Daryl created a framework that allowed, till this date, about 120 different architects to work in Seaside. And that's phenomenal. If there's 350 buildings there, that 120 different architects, and that's very, very rare. And I think that's the charm and the beauty of Seaside, that so many architects were able to come and play in the sandbox and add to the place and actually build upon what other architects had done before them. So it was really a learning process for many architects. And what we do today, unfortunately, is try to compress this into one architect doing the entire project, or thinking he has the ego enough to create diversity in one complete project. And there are very few, and I see Michael Schwartz there, and very few architects have been able to do that. I think, and I call out David's project in Fort Worth, where David's done a lot of the buildings, but it takes a very skilled architect, and it took a lot of time to do that. But there are very few examples in the country or in the world where one architect has done all the buildings and it's been a meaningful outcome. So you have projects like this. I did put this one in for Andreas. So here it actually says, that it's going to be built all in one single phase, all that stuff, okay? That's not urban design. That's a large-scale architectural project. This is the model that Todd referenced. It is the size of a couple of ping pong tables, and it follows the Seaside Code. Before it was a graphic code, and it was a series of must-dos. Every type, there were 8 types of typologies in Seaside, and each one had 8 points that you had to do. And this is the model that the students built of the town center and all the houses, Seaside Avenue, the Lyceum. In the initial stages of the Lyceum, it was based on Jackson Square in New Orleans, was the prototype. So it's quite a different feel from what it is today. And then it changed to a UVA model within a very short period of time. So here's the Mount Rushmore of Seaside. We have Robert, who's in the front row, and his wife, Daryl, Andres and Liz, and Leon Creer, who's really the kind of inspiration for the ideas behind Seaside. So, and I like to think of Seaside as, it's a process, it's really a love story. It's a love story between the architects, the developer and his wife, about creating this really wonderful place. And it's been this kind of love story with a lot of architects who've come to Seaside over the years and wanted to be a part of it. And when I go to the archives, the annex building in Seaside, you find hundreds and hundreds of drawings by architects who came to Seaside, had a conversation with Robert, and then did a scheme to kind of say, hey, Robert, what about my scheme for the pavilion? Or what about this? And of course, Robert was very entertaining and would always talk to them and charming. And they would walk away thinking, they had a commission. But Robert was just sort of entertaining and happy that they wanted to be part of this. So there are hundreds of schemes like that by architects who visited Seaside for the first time and said, I could do a pavilion, or this is my idea. And they wanted to be part of that love story. So I'm going to do this in 4 decades. So it starts out, this is an aerial picture of Seaside in 1965. Here's the town of Seagrove. That's Robert and his grandfather together on the beach at Seaside before anything was built, way, way back. And Robert's pretty young back then. And here's Robert and Darrell in their land yacht that they traveled around America, looking at southern part of America, looking at small towns. And this is a picture in Grayton Beach, which is pretty close to the Seaside property. But what you can see here is that Seagrove had a grid structure, and that same block structure is actually carried through. And interestingly enough, in 1981, the folks in Seagrove did not want to connect to Seaside because they thought it would devalue their property. So they fought the connections. There are connections to the east, but they were sadly mistaken because Seagrove has really retained its old value as Seaside has really escalated. So here's the love story again, Robert and Darrell back in the 80s. This is 30A, which is the main road that cuts through the site. The frame that you're looking at here is 900 by 900 feet. Okay, that's the frame. And it's just the kind of frontage of Seaside. These are the natural dunes that are there, the beach, the road. And this little gorge is called George's Gorge, which is a cut-through that the rednecks had made with driving their trucks to access the beach. It's got this little slight curve there. And so that's what they found the site in 1980, what it looked like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that. This frame is constant, and you can pick any one thing you're interested in, or it's Seaside. Focus on that because a lot of things change, a lot of things move. And so you can just pick something that you're interested in, focus on that, and see how it changes over the years. So the first thing that was done, this is the night crew staying about 3 miles away from Seaside, and the market that was started. Some of these images are a little bit out of sequence, but I'm just trying to let you know what the feel is. So to start the whole process, Darrell and Robert built this little deck here on the beach. It's a little, 20 by 48 feet structure. It's just elevated so they could sell shrimp and beer and invite people to enjoy the beach. 82, Robert buys 2 sharecropper shacks and moves them to the site. There they are. And somewhere he finds them. They're looking for someone. I forget where he found them, Robert, but there were 3 of them. He moved all 3 to the site. And Robert's a roommate from a college takes an Airstream. So this is 1981, 1982, and uses the Airstream, places it on the site and uses it as an office. So it's the first, we talk about containers and things like that. This actually happened 40 years ago. Okay? And that's a working drawing for that sharecropper shack to be converted into the shrimp shack back there. Okay? And that's what it looked like. Those 2 buildings were placed right on the central axis of Seaside. Here's that platform, here it is, and here's that gorge that cuts through, and a series of little poles in the ground where they hung canvas across to make the market. And that's what it looked like. It's this is that. Actually, I'm sorry. This is new to me. This is that platform, the buildings, and a little structure, and these little columns, that's all it is, okay? And the shrimp shack and the restaurant gets added onto, and 2 bathrooms get added right there. And that's what it looks like on a Saturday in 1983, okay? Then we bring in some containers right here to add some office space. Deborah Book does a series of little buildings that becomes perspicacity. This structure, which is right there, that little building gets repurposed and moved. That structure is that structure. So it moves from here to there. Okay, and you get 2 porches added on it. And look at the capitals and base on that. It was just simple pieces of wood slapped together to make a capital and a base, not very classical, but kind of does the trick. And that structure is still there today. It has been moved. So a lot of pieces have moved over the years, and it's right there. Okay, flagpole has moved up across the street. So in 1985, we get the post office being built, and at that time it's 10 by 20 feet. Okay, the flagpole's behind it, and down the street, the Tupelo Pavilion is built by Ernesto Bush on Tupelo Street. Okay, and you see these are containers, 8 by 20 containers sitting right there that work as little offices and storage spaces for the restaurants, etc. I mean, the same kind of containers that we now are very popular today, but they weren't in such great shape, so they actually built roofs over them. It really confused me looking at the aerial photographs because I thought they were actual buildings, but then I found out that they were containers with roofs to shed the water. Okay, and I got 40 years to go. Okay, so I'm going to run through. Okay, so that's what it looks like. 2 pavilions, and that's a town center. Then that same platform, which is over here, gets built upon. Derek Smith does a design for the pavilion, and Eric Watson continues it, and that's what it looks like, and the water tower comes in 1987. Okay, there's Deborah Burke looking at the footings for the Monica Market and the Steve Hall building right there, and the rental office by Scott Merrill, and a stage gets built around the amphitheater. This building gets moved onto that site, becomes a restaurant. That's Steve's Hall building, what it looked like back then. It's over there. That's in 89. 90, the motor court gets built, very elegant structure by Scott Merrill. That's right here. Another bread and breakfast opens there, and the hotels and all this, not the hotels, but the restaurant expands and more retail. Okay, and that's what it looks like at the end of that first decade. And you have to have a good photographer because that is just a series of plywood boxes, 8 foot by 8 foot, made out of plywood with metal roofs, and that's the market. And some of the images of some of the houses which were built on the east side of Seaside. Okay, love story continues. There's Andres and Liz. And here's what it looks like in 91. The restaurant has expanded. Every time you see something red, it's either changed or expanded or modified in that year. So that, little buildings are being added on to these various things. Shades opens over there. Perspicacity changes a little bit. Pickles opens right there. And that's that same little structure now repurposed, that used to be here, has now moved just a few feet away and becomes the entrance to Pickles. Little structures get around the town center. And then, okay, and this expands. And here's the obelisk that builds here with this wonderful ramp and staircase. Okay. The pizza bar opens to the left there. And then the first Airstream food, it's a Frostbites, a little shaved ice business opens and is located there. And still, that one is still here today. The post office gets added to, and a little 10 by 10 box behind. The Truman Show comes to town. They use the Machado Silvetti building, which is here, which is unfinished. They use it for 2 years as a staging area for the film crew, and it actually opens as the building and the apartments in 1987. More buildings. The money from the Truman Show goes to build a school, and so the first school building is here, and 2 other buildings identical to the school building, and they were supposed to be moved, but they weren't moved, and new buildings were built there. That's a school, and this little structure is right there in the middle of the town center, and the school gets added on to. And that's what Perspicacity looks like, and that's what it looks like at the end of the second decade. Now we get another Airstream right there, opening. It's actually a sushi place. This is an incorrect image. More buildings get built. This thing changes to another business. The school gets added on. Building 3 gets added on. And that's what it looks like. The Scott Merrill's next building over here gets built, mixed-use building. There's actually a glass artist right in one of those buildings. You can see the Scott's building and the bookstore right there. It's in this building. You can see that. So artists are performing, right? Artists are making things. Business changes again. Then we get a hurricane, and that's what it looks like. That's the obelisk, and that's the beach line. Almost everything's wiped out. The entire dune is wiped out. That little ramp stair disappears, which was going down there. And Dan Solomon gets to build his building, and the obelisk now is the ground is replanted and the beach is replenished. That's Cinderella's Circle, folks sitting around right there. By 2009, we have more airstreams coming in right there. More residential buildings get built in that corner. Another residential building, you can see the change in style happening right there, and the post office moves and gets expanded and gets pushed forward. And that's what it looks like at the end of that decade. Okay. We get some really large buildings, residential buildings, monster buildings, sleep 25 people right there, one family right there, and the businesses change again right there. Okay. New houses being built along the edges, and then I do the academic village, which is a series of Katrina cottages that we bought on an auction and placed them there and start to make the academic village around the Lyceum. Okay. Another airstream shows up, which only lasts 3 years. The walkway looks like that right there. And that's what it looks like today, one of my projects. 2 new walkways, this kind of inverse perspective. It's really the shadow of the obelisk dropped down. And then the other walkway, which is a brand new walkway to Buttonalley's, right here. And that's what it looks like just a few months ago. Moving forward in 17, the post office is moving from there to there with some bathrooms behind. Okay, so that's going to move, making way for the Kriya Tower. And that's the bathrooms at the back of Seaside Avenue. Then the airstreams are moving around the central square. We'll take one more minute. Buttonalley's gets expanded, and Pickles and all that stuff moves because the hotel's coming, in the following year. So in 2019, the hotel's broken up into several buildings. Across the motor court moves away, end building there, bridges across right there. This is a bar restaurant on the bridge that connects the 2 buildings. And then the airstreams move back around the central square. Another hotel building goes there, and that's an image with the Kriya Tower. The Lyceum gets completed with buildings 4 on both sides, and Richard Economacus's assembly hall at the end. And before Richard's building gets built, we're building an assembly hall, which is really made out of pallets on the same circular building. This is what it looks like right there. It's made out of pallets. It's temporary till we get money to build Richard's tremendous building. That's the building. It connects to watercolor with this kind of Villalante table. Here's the Kriya Tower, what it would look like, the Buttonalley's, and I'll leave you with that image. So that's the 2020 image of Seaside. So thank you.